Shalom Aleichem and welcome everyone as we are preparing this week Shabbat Parshat Vayeira. We're going to be learning Le'ilui Nishmat Simcha Chaim ben Elisheva. His Hashem, his neshama shall go Mechail B'Gan Eden, higher and higher in the schus of our learning and the schus of the brachot that we're saying today over here. Everything should go Bez Hashem to help him, and he should continue to help us. Rabotai, I want to start off with this picture, this scenario. Reuven and Shimon had plans to go somewhere together, to a wedding or bar mitzvah, whatever it was. And the morning of the event, Reuven calls Shimon and tells Shimon, I'm really sorry. I know I was supposed to take you today to the event, but my child is not feeling so well. I'm going to have to cancel. Please make other arrangements.
When he calls?
He calls him in the morning, early morning.
So he has time.
Plenty of time. Shimon says, thank you for letting me know. Thank you, Reuven, for letting me know. I'll figure out another ride. And he hangs up the phone. My question to you now is, Rabotai, what was wrong in that conversation?
I hope she feels better.
Very good. Rabotai, in this week's parasha, it says as follows. Abraham is talking to Hashem. Vayar. He raised his hands, he raised his eyes and he saw there were three people standing before him. And then the pasuk continues, and what does it say? Vayar, vayaratz l'kratam. He saw and he ran after them. Rashi says, why does it say the word vayar twice? Vayisa'ina vayar, he lifted his eyes and he saw. Vayar, vayaratz l'kratam. And he saw and he ran after them. So Rashi asks, why does it have to say twice? And Rashi explains, Harishon kimashma'o. The first vayar is simply what it means, that he saw. V'hasheni, lashon havana. The second one is that he understood. You understand? A lot of people, that conversation that we brought, that's the way it goes. People hear things, and they leave it at that. People see things, and they just leave it at that. Rav Smith says that he was once driving past a bus stop, and he picked up an older man, and he brought him into an alter yid. He brought him into the car, and the old man started crying. He said, "Why are you crying?" He said, "I'm standing here for hours, and no one gives me a ride, and the buses are not coming, and no one gives me a ride." To the Hamish neighborhood, he looks at no one gives me a ride. So Rav Smith saying this, that, and the guy says, but no one was giving me a ride. You know what I was thinking? This older man says. He said, I wish I was a worm. I wish I was a worm. Why? He says, I want to be a worm. Why? He says, today everyone's making a big hak. Everyone's talking about the tolaim, all the bugs and all the worms. Everyone sees it. They're using microscopes to look at it. They're using all sorts of things to find them. Here we have our mashgiach in the house. Right? How close you have to look. You have to train yourself to look. And they see worms, but they don't see me. Because that's the way people are, unfortunately. But that wasn't Avraham Avinu. Rav Chaim Velozhin, he says as follows, and he brings this in the beginning of the Nefesh HaChaim. Ha'adam lo le'atzmo nivra. Man was not created for himself. Rak leho'il la'acharini b'chol asher yimatzeh b'chocho la'asot. A person was created not for himself, but rather to help someone else. This is from Rav Chaim Velozhin. Rabotai, this is what we call a vayar person. Someone who actually sees. He sees, and then he understands what he's seeing. We have another person in history, in Tanakh, that was a Vayar person. Yosef HaTzadik. The Nar Eved Ivri. It says, Vayavo Alehem Yosef Baboker. Right? Sar Mashkim, Sar Oifim are in prison. The butler, the baker. And Yosef sees them and he says, he comes to them and he says, Vayarotam bihinam zoafim. And he says, and the pasuk says, and he saw that they were depressed. And he says to them, Madua penechem ra'im hayom. Why do you guys, why don't you look good? Yosef HaTzadik is in prison. His brother sold him out. He went there. He had the whole scenario of Eshet Potiphar. He could have just mind his own business and pay attention to his own problems. But he saw two people looking down. Vayar, he saw it, and he asked them. And what happened because of that? The whole thing for him becoming viceroy, second in command, all happened because he asked these two people, Madua penechem ra'im hayom. You're looking down. You're not looking good. Why is that? He cared enough to notice and act upon what he saw.
I'm here.
I will tell you, sometimes we come home, right? And the house looks out of order. Terrible. Worse than usual. So there's two ways. Everybody sees it. But there's two ways to really see it and two ways to react. Right? The one way you would come in, you see the mess. What's this? Right? And who knows what happens from there. Or the person who really sees. And he says, how could it be like this? It must be something happened today more than usual. Vayar. He understands that his spouse would not leave it like that. Stamazoi. Just like that. It must be something happened. Vayar. He really sees it. And then he does something about it. I remember when I was in my kanchuri, in my engagement, we took my grandmother, she lived and be well. We took her to the engagement party and we were bringing her back. And I had the chus of driving my grandmother back to Brooklyn. The engagement party was in Queens by my wife's house. And at that time, my fiance's house. And then we were driving back. So when we were driving back, my grandmother decided to give me some marriage advice. And she told me these words. Now I'm translating it into English. I can't say the way she said it to me. She said it in a mixture of Russian and Bukharian. But she pretty much said to me as follows. She said, if you come home and you see a mess, pick up the broom and start sweeping. If you come home and something's out of place, get up and put it away. This is what she was saying, to be a Vayar person. You came home and you see something that's not right. It means something not right happened. You have to look a little deeper. This is what it means to be Vayar. This is Avraham Avinu. He didn't just see people walking by. He realized they need something. You know, some people say, what can I do? Okay, at home, maybe I can do the broom, maybe I can put it away. But other people, what can I do? You know, a lot of times, all people need to hear is something good. Sometimes they just need to hear a nice word. Something nice about them. You know, the Zohar HaKadosh, we mentioned this many times, Zohar HaKadosh, in Parshat Tazriyah says, just as someone says Lashon Hara, he gets punished. The Zohar HaKadosh says that if someone could have said a nice word and he didn't say a nice word, he gets punished for not saying the nice word. Chesed b'dibur. All the person have to say is speak a nice few words. And if you could have said it and you didn't say it, the Zohar HaKadosh says you get punished. You know, in America they call religious Jews, right, Orthodox Jews, there's another word, observant Jews, right? Jews who are observant. Rav Smith says, what does that mean to be an observant Jew? An observant Jew means you have to be a Vayar person. You have to be able to observe, to be able to see, to really observe. This is what it means to be an observant Jew. There's another person in Jewish history in Tanakh who was a Vayar person. who saw and did something about it. The greatest of Nevi'im, as it says in Pasuk, Vayigdal Moshe vayitzel ehav vayar b'sivultam. And he saw their suffering. Moshe Rabbeinu, who was growing up in the palace by Bitya, he was growing up in the palace, in Pharaoh's palace. He had everything he wanted. He was the prince of Egypt. And he went out to see them. As Rashi says, what Rashi say? Natan einav v'libo liyot mitzer aleihem. He put his heart to be pained over them, to feel it, what they're feeling. And he went and he helped them. And he got them off Shabbos. How did he do it? Vayar. He saw. Everyone knows this famous Maisa that a few days before Pesach, a man came to the Bet HaLevi and asked the Bet HaLevi, can I make the 4 kosot of Pesach night on milk? No, the Bet HaLevi looked at the question. He said, you should use wine. And then he went to his envelope, took out a couple of dollars, a large amount of money, and gave it to the man. Have a kosher, Pesach. Chag kosher v'sameach. And his family saw that he gave a lot of money. So they said to the rabbi, why'd you give so much money? And the Bet HaLevi said, if the man is asking me to use milk for the Rabak Kosot, for the 4 cups, that means he doesn't even have meat to eat at the Seder. He doesn't have chicken to eat. And so I gave him money not only for the wine, I gave him money for the meat and chicken as well. This is a Vayeira person. He doesn't just see what's right in front of him, but he sees what's really there. The Havana, the understanding of it. The Gemara tells us that we as Jews, Tamim Tiyeh Hashem Elokecha, we have no superstitions. We don't believe in superstitions. Black cat walks, mirror breaks, floor number 13. These things don't exist by us. And then the Gemara says, how could it be we don't do superstitious things? People used to hang a red string on a tree. The Gemara says that wasn't a superstitious thing. You know what the red string on the tree meant? No. That meant that the tree was sick. And when people saw the red string, what did they do? They would daven for the tree. People used to daven for the tree. What about us? We see an ambulance on the street. What do? All the kids run out. All the parents looking through the windows. Who's coming out? Who's going in? Right? Oh, they took him. I remember once I was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. It was Purim day, but I wasn't drunk. I had a stomach virus that was very bad, and I couldn't walk anymore. I couldn't eat, couldn't drink, nothing. No one should ever see such a thing. It was very bad. So they had to take me, Atzallah had to take me and bring me to the hospital. And I remember when I got back home, like a day later, all the neighbors, I lived in an apartment building, all the neighbors, oh, we saw you coming out. Nobody came. Nobody said hi. No one came to see my wife the next day when I wasn't home to see if she knew anything. When I came back, they're telling me we saw you. You know, when we see someone has an ambulance in front of their house, what are you supposed to be thinking at that time? What are you supposed to be seeing? Someone's in trouble. Say Shalom Ma'alot. You don't know the name? You don't need to know the name. Hashem, whoever's in this house, whoever needs a Yeshua, Shalom Ma'alot, Sayinai Harim. We see things, and we totally don't pay attention to what we're seeing, or how to look through it. We hear a person needs a job, and we hear it, and that's it. Did we daven for that person? He needs a job. Hashem, please help him find it. Did we try to network? Maybe we can find something for him. Shidduch crisis. We hear people don't have shidduchim. So what do? Some people say, oh, he doesn't want to get married. He's already 40 years old. Who said he doesn't want to get married? I mean, it's very hard for him. Did you daven for him? Did you try for him? It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy to make shidduchim. And I'm not saying it's easy to find someone a job. But what'd you do about it? Did you actually see it? Or you just saw it and you went? A Vayeira person, Avraham Avinu, teaches us. Yosef teaches us. Moshe Rabbeinu teaches us. You don't just see something. If you're seeing it, you got to do something. Daven, help, become part of it. It says, "Im kesef talvet ami te'ani imach." Rashi explains te'ani imach. Right? It means if you have money, you should lend it to someone who's poor. What does it mean? Te'ani imach, the poor person's with you. Rashi says, "Heve mistakel ba'atzmecha ki'ilu ata ani." You have to look at yourself as if you were the poor person. You understand what it means to look at a poor person? You have to start thinking you're the poor person. Vayar means to think that you're that person who's having that trouble. And now you can come to help them. If you're having that trouble, wouldn't you help yourself? If you look at that person as you would help yourself. You would help yourself. So obviously, if someone's going through a hard time, wouldn't you want to help? Everyone to their possibility. But this is what it means to be a Vayeira person. To see. To really, really see. You know, here, Rav Chaim Shlita brings a story. I think the story has to do with seeing as well. He says his brother-in-law would work in Manhattan and travel back to Borough Park on the train. And one Friday, as he was coming back home, he couldn't find a seat on the train. So he took out his little Tehillim. As he was standing, he was reading Tehillim. And all of a sudden, he sees two Jews. Not two Jews, he sees two people. He sees two people. Don't look Jewish at all. A husband and a wife, looks like. And they move over and they tell him to come sit down. He says, thank you. He sits down. He starts reading a Tehillim, finishes Tehillim, takes out his Gemara, he's doing his Daf Yomi, and comes to a stop, and he's thinking, are these guys Jewish? Are they not? He doesn't know. They don't look Jewish. But he says, you know what? I'll tell them a good Shabbos. So as he's about to walk off the train, he turns to the couple and he says, thank you, and good Shabbos. And suddenly, as if a heavy cloud had been lifted, this man who was sitting there with what appeared to be his wife says, wow, this is the first time in over 20 years someone has told me good Shabbos again. So now, this guy who's a Baba Verchosin sits down and says, you know what? We have to talk. And he starts talking to them. He finds out she's Jewish, he's Jewish, they're both Jewish. He grew up somewhat traditional. She knew Yom Kippur and Pesach, but that's it. And he started to talk to them. You know, you think about it, he ended up going back to the Bronx and coming back to Brooklyn on the train over again. But he talked to them. Eventually, this couple, I don't know where they're up to today, but when he had contact to them, he said that they started to come closer. They went to the local Chabad in their area, and they started to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How much, I don't know. But he looked. He saw. He said, Efsher, possibly they're Jewish. Good Shabbos. You know, a couple of months ago actually, I was on Central Avenue here in the Five Towns, and all of a sudden this guy stops me, asks me for change for the meter. So I give him. I'm about to go to the restaurant with my wife and kid to go eat a little lunch. He tells me, you got 2 minutes? I say, yeah. He said, I have a story to share with you. And he starts telling me how he's Jewish. He doesn't look Jewish at all. And that he puts on tefillin every single day. And recently he was getting a little bit, didn't want to do it. But now that another Jew helped him, he's going to continue. And he starts telling me his whole story. How he never used to put on tefillin. And then he was working for a Syrian guy. And the Syrian guy was putting on one day tefillin. He's like, what's this? He says, you do it? And the Syrian guy says, yeah. He says, what about you? He says, no, I don't. He says, okay, I'll buy you tefillin. And the Syrian Jew bought him tefillin. And he was wearing it every single day, including Shabbat. He says, he didn't know you weren't allowed to wear it on Shabbat until he worked for another Jew somewhere else. And they saw him putting on tefillin. And he says, I put it on every day. And they told him, put it on every day. He says, but they said Shabbat. And he learned not to put it on Shabbat. But all this because people looked. People saw him. People gave him 2 cents of their time. People talked to the guy. And that same week that story happened to me, I was at work, and this representative from a company comes. He had a very Jewish name, but he didn't look Jewish at all. And we did all the stuff we had to do at work. And when we were finished, I was, a nice guy. I walked him out to the exit. He knows the way out, but I walked him out. And as we're walking out, he tells me, I'm Jewish. I said, you sound Jewish. Your name sounds very Jewish, right? He says, I'm actually Reform. But I tell you, I've been working in Williamsburg with the Satmar community, and I love them. I love the Hasidic Satmar community. I love what they did. I love what they did. He says, I wish I could become more religious myself. But I'm already in my ways and stuff like that. I told him, you can always come back. He's like, no. And I can't push the guy. But, you see, you look at them. You give them the time of day, and you see how much they want to come back. That was Avraham Avinu. He saw what would look like Arabs of the time walking. He didn't just send them, I don't do chesed to them. Everybody was someone he gave chesed to. Because you know what? It's very easy to become part of a, a big organization. Everybody knows about this organization. It's very easy to be part of it. Oh, a big Rebbe is coming to town. I'll open my doors to him. Very big, very easy to do. Because it's fancy, it's big. But what happens if it's a regular guy? There was once a tzaddik nistar, a hidden tzaddik. And he was going through a town. And he was looking for a place to stay. He came to the rich man's house, and the rich man said, you don't stay here. I don't have such people dressed like you stay in my house. And kicked him out. 2-3 years later, he revealed himself as a tzaddik, and he became a rebbe. And now he was given horses and chariots, and he was traveling through town again. And he came to that same town. And this rich man came to the rebbe and said to him, please stay in my house, please stay in my house. The rebbe said, of course. That day, the Rebbe sends his horses and chariots to the rich man's house. But the Rebbe himself was staying at someone else's house in the city, in a poor man's house, a Talmud Chacham. So the rich man finds out that the horses is in his house, and the Rebbe's in another house. So he runs to the other house. He says, Rebbe, what? My house is not good enough for the Rebbe? The Rebbe says, I'll tell you, I was here 3 years ago, and I asked you to come into your house, and you told me you don't take people like me. This year I came, and you asked me to come. So I realized that it all was the difference was the horses and chariots that I had. Now that I have horses and chariots, you're inviting me. And when I didn't have them, you didn't invite me. So the horses and chariots I sent to you, and I went to the Talmud Chacham's house. Because Rabotai, to do chesed, when it's fancy, when it's an important person, that anyone can do. Real chesed is when you do it for anyone and everyone. This is what it means to do real chesed. How does a person do real chesed? What does it mean, real chesed? Rabotai, Avraham Avinu is talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he sees 3 people walking, and he tells Hashem, hold on. He tells Hashem, hold on. Now he doesn't tell him, hang up. We'll have to deal with that later, not today. But he doesn't tell him, hang up. He says, hold on. And he runs to do Achnasa Zorchim, inviting guests. So much so the Gemara says, from this we learn, Gedolah achnasat orchim me'akbalat penei Shekhinah. More greater is achnasas orchim than accepting the Shekhinah. And we have to understand this, because this is you're talking to Hashem. The greatest and biggest things you could do. And you're telling me achnasat orchim is greater? So Parshat Pshat, to understand this, I saw a very nice mashal by Harav David Pinto Shlito. He writes that there was once a king who loved fish, and he had on staff a fisherman, and every day he would collect fish. One day they were traveling through the deserts or whatever they were going, and the king was talking to everybody, the whole entourage, and all of a sudden the fisherman said to the king, "I'm sorry, I gotta go." And the king let him go. Why? Because the fisherman found a place to get some fish, and since the king loved fish, he allowed Abraham to go. He allowed the fisherman to go and get it. It's the same story. Hashem loves when you take care of people. So even if you're talking to Hashem, Hashem allows you to go. That's Pashut way to understanding what it means that Achnasat Orchim is greater, because Hashem does also Achnasat Orchim. He gives everybody what they need. But I want to now say to you another pshat. And this comes from the Maharal. The Maharal writes, what's pshat that Achnasat Orchim is greater than accepting the Shekhinah? Listen to what the Maharal writes. He says, Kabbalat Penei Shekhinah, no human can do completely. You cannot get the whole Shekhinah. Since we're human, we're limited in how much of the Shekhinah we can be mikabel. It's a limit. All what a person can do, the Maharal writes, is go through the motions of being mikabel pnei Shekhinah. But when it comes to helping another Jew, we can do it completely. And every person, B'Tselem Elokim bara oto, the Shekhinah is in that person. And since he can do it completely, he should do Achnasat Orchim, then being Mikabel, rather than being Mikabel Pnei Shekhinah. That's the Maharal writes. The Maharal writes you cannot completely get Mikabel Pnei Shekhinah, but you can completely do Achnasat Orchim, and in Achnasat Orchim exists Mikabel Pnei Shekhinah because of B'Tselem Elokim bara oto. Therefore, that's the mitzvah you do. Rabotai, this is going to explain so many incidents that we hear about at Giluim. The Maharal Diskin, the Diskin orphanage in Eretz Yisrael. He was a great Gaon. He was sitting at home, learning with his students, and in his house was open to everyone. Came some old people, and his wife, the Rebbetzin, put out some bread for them. And one old man was trying to eat the bread, and he can't eat the bread because the crust was very hard. The Maharal was delivering a shir. And Rav Diskin was delivering the shir, and what did he do in the middle of the shir? He stopped the shir, went over to this old man, and started to peel the crust from the bread, and gave him to eat. And for like this, for an hour he was doing this. And his Talmidim said, Kavod Rav, how could you do this? Torah. He says, why are you asking me? Ask Avram Avinu. He's talking to Hashem. He went to do something else. The Tzemach Tzedek was learning with the Baal Tanya. Right? The Baal Tanya was his grandfather. Tzemach Tzedek, two Lubavitch Rebbes. Tzemach Tzedek was a young man. He was learning with his grandfather, the Baal Tanya. And all in the middle of learning, the Baal Tanya gets up and leaves. And he goes, takes care of a crying baby in the house, and he comes back. And the Tzemach Tzedek says to him, who's going to become the future Lubavitch Rebbe, tells his grandfather, he says, we were learning together. I didn't hear the baby. How did you hear it? Baal Tanya says, if there would be a Jew crying at the end of the world, I would hear it. You're in the middle of learning. I would say, we have to understand what it means. We really have to look all the way back to a Mishnah in Masechet Peah. The Mishnah says as follows: Elu divarim, something we say every morning. Elu divarim, k'sha'adam ochel perotehem ba'olam hazeh. Remember, most mitzvahs you only get the reward in the next world. But it says there are certain mitzvot. You do them here, you'll get their fruits here. V'hakerin kayemet lo l'olam haba, and the principal amount stays for the next world. Which mitzvot? Kivud avayim u'gmilul hasadim. V'achnasat orchim u'vikur holim. So, respecting your parents, doing good deeds. Hachnasat orchim, guests. Bikur holim, caring for the sick. V'achnasat kala, bavat shalom. Now, the Rosh explains, why is this so? Why is it that these mitzvot, you get to have reward in this world also? So the Rosh says, you know what the Rosh says? Listen what he says. Listen to these words. Abotai, Chesed is going to change for us. Listen what he says. Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu chafetz yoter b'mitzvot sheyaseh vahem gam ritzon habriut mimitzvot sheben adam lekono. The Rosh, the Rishon, he writes that it's greater to Hashem if you do mitzvot that's between you and another person than between you and Hashem. When you do mitzvot between ben adam lehavero, between a man and his fellow man, that is greater than doing mitzvot between a person and Hashem. Mimitzvot sheben adam lekono. Rav Shach, Zechet Tzadik L'Bracha, was helping Rav Chaim Oizer Gordinsky to publish his Sheilot Utshuvot Sefer. People asked him questions, he gave answers and halacha, and they was helping him to publish it. And Rav Shach was helping him. He saw that some of these tshuvot, some of these answers were written 60 years ago. So he asked Rav Chaim Oizer, he said, how come you didn't publish the Shailot Tshuvot Sefer? Why didn't you make this book, questions and answers in halacha, 60 years ago when you answered them? Why did you wait 60 years? He says, I tell you the truth. As I was growing up, I realized that helping people was of the most greatest importance than anything else. The greatest importance than anything else was helping people. So I got so busy doing Hesed that I didn't have any chance to print my Svarim, my books. I'm going to tell you now a story that when I first read it, I was shocked and I loved it. Because this really teaches us what it means to do Chesed. Listen to this, Rabotai. Rabbi Akiva Eger. Who doesn't know Rabbi Akiva Eger? The greatest Gaonim of times. You can't learn Gemara without Rabbi Akiva Eger. Rabbi Akiva Eger was once at home, and he was hosting the great author of the Netivot HaMishpat, Harav Yaakov Melisa, the great Lisa Rav. And they were sitting and they were talking in Torah. And while they're in the middle of talking of Torah, there's a knock on the door. They open the door, and one of the Bali Tzedakah, one of the people collect Tzedakah, Moshe, one of the local collectors of Tzedakah, was standing there trying to collect some Tzedakah. Rabbi Akiva Eger opens the door, and he sees it's freezing cold outside, and this guy is shivering away, trying to collect Tzedakah. And Rabbi Akiva Eger says, come inside. And he tells the Baal Tzedakah to sit down. He brings him. He sits him down. And then Rabbi Akiva Eger gets on the floor, takes off this man's boot, the Baal Tzedakah's boot, and he starts to massage and warm up his feet. Minutes ago, he was learning Torah with the great Lisa Rav. And then Rabbi Akiva Eger turns to the Nitivot HaMishpat, to the Rav of Lisa, and he tells him, the Lisa Rav is mechubed mit the zweiter Fuss. The Lisa Rav is honored with the second foot. And comes Elisheva Rav, sits down, and he starts to massage and warm up the second foot. Rabotai, what's going on in this story? Two great Gaonim, all of a sudden rubbing someone's feet to warm him up. And Vayeira wasn't joking when he said this. And they did it. Why? Because, as the Rosh says, Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu hafetz yoter, because Hashem loves it more. B'mitzvot she'aseh v'hem gam ritzon ha'briut, when a person does mitzvot that also helps others. B'mitzvot she'ben adam l'kono, the mitzvot that are just between him and Hashem. What does it mean to do chesed to someone else? Now we learn how great it is. But what does it mean? What happens to that person when you do chesed to them? The Avnei Nezer was once serving a guest. And the guest said, please, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. I don't deserve all this kavod. I don't deserve it. The Avnei Nezer opened his window and he showed him a tannery across the road. He said, you see in that store, they have a bunch of leather, a bunch of hides. But some of them turn into tefillin and they become kadosh. You're right, you're saying you're nobody. But right here now, you are a guest. And you deserve, people should wait on you. The Sfat Emet writes that a guest becomes a chefza shel mitzvah. He becomes an item of mitzvah. You understand? The guest now is a chefetz shel mitzvah. He himself becomes a mitzvah. Rav Zusha, he part of a gullus. He would go around, exiled himself from place to place. And Rav Zusha didn't dress fancy, and people didn't want to bring him in. And one time someone brought him into the house and gave him to eat. And all of a sudden Rav Zusha starts kissing himself. So the host says, what are you doing? He says, now that you're giving me food and you're giving me a place to stay, I became a guest. And a guest becomes a hefet shel mitzvah. He becomes a piece of a mitzvah himself. If such, I'm a piece of mitzvah. I'm kissing myself because I'm a hefet shel mitzvah. Do we understand that our guests are a hefet shel mitzvah? They are the mitzvah. Chaim was once taking care of his guests. And his guest is telling him, you don't have to do this for me. I can do it myself. I'll make the pillow. I'll make this. I'll make that. And the Chaim tells him, and what? Tomorrow you're going to wear tefillin for me also? This is my mitzvah. My mitzvah to take care of the guest. You don't tell me how to do it, when to do it. Rav Chaim Brim, Zecher Tzadik Lebracha, was once learning late with the Hazon Ish, and he missed his bus to Yerushalayim. So he stayed in the Hazon Ish's home. Rav Chaim Brim says that night, the Hazon Ish, the Stipler, and the Stipler's Rebbetzin, who all lived in the Hazon Ish's house, were all taking care of him. This, that. The Hazon Ish was saying, you do this, you do that, and everybody was doing things for him. Rav Chaim Brim was becoming so uncomfortable. He says to three, you have the Stipler's Rebbetzin, and the Chazon Ish, the greatest of people. Tonight is, who's Yartzai? The Chazon Ish Yartzai. Wow. Tonight is the Chazon Ish's Yartzai. Listen. And he tells the Chazon Ish, he says to the Chazon Ish, please, I feel so uncomfortable doing all these things for me. The Chazon Ish tells him, since when does an etrog tell the owner how to hold it? You are a mitzvah now. You are my etrog. I'm making mitzvah to you. You don't tell me how I'm going to do the mitzvah for you. Do you understand, Rabotai, what we're trying to say here now? Do you understand how great the mitzvah is? Not only Hashem loves it more, but the people you're doing the chesed to, they themselves become a piece of mitzvah. There's a lot of sigulot they say about people who do chesed and do achnasat orchim. And you all know this already. But I want to make us aware of the greatness of what it means to do chesed, what it means to see somebody, and what it means to do chesed is something that Hashem loves more than you do a mitzvah just to Him. That the person you're doing the chesed for, he becomes a chayfet shel mitzvah. He becomes a piece of mitzvah. He himself. This is something we need to keep with us at all times. Something we need to remember in our lives, to become a Vayeira person, to become a person who does chesed, who understands that what he's doing to is a chayfet shel mitzvah. Let's move on to our final lesson from this week's Parshat. It says in Pasuk, Vayomer Hashem el Avraham, lama zeh tzahaka Sarah. Hashem's tell Avraham, why did Sarah laugh? She heard she's going to have a child. And she laughed. And Hashem says, Hayipalem Hashem davar. Is there anything that's beyond Hashem? Is there something that Hashem can't do? Nothing is beyond Hashem. The Midrash writes, a mashal, a man is carrying 2 links of a metal that happen to snap apart. So he walks into a blacksmith and he asks the blacksmith, can you fix it? Do you fix it? Can you fix it? And the blacksmith looks at him and starts to laugh. He says, I make new ones. If I make new ones, you don't think I can fix it? HaKadosh Baruch Hu made person. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the world from nothing. You don't think Hashem can make a miracle? You don't think Hashem can do something else? Hashem davar, is there something that Hashem can't do? We have to believe 100% that everything that needs to happen, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can do. Rav Yaakov Galinsky, he writes that after the war, he was feeling very depressed. So again, he went to the Hazon Ish. Yard side. I didn't know. I was preparing this last night. I didn't know. I was preparing the shir. Lishma. He comes to the Chazon Ish and he tells him feeling very depressed. And the Chazon Ish says, let me tell you a story. The Chazon Ish says, there was a city, if I'm reading it right, Leipzig, was a city in Europe that everyone came to do business there. There was a wealthy man. Every year he used to go, it was like a show. He make big sales, big contracts, networking. And this man couldn't go one year. He was sick. So he sent his wife, and he gave her a lot of money. And he said, go, and this is what you're going to do. His wife gets to the city of Leipzig, and within a few hours, she loses the envelope full of money. And she's running around, did anyone find the money? Anyone find the money? And she sees one Jew walking around, very religious, with a big smile on his face. She says, what happened? Why are you smiling so much? And he shows the envelope. He found an envelope. She says, that's my envelope. He says, maybe. But the halacha is that if you lose it in such a public place, the halacha considers it as the person was miyayish. The person gave up on it. Because it's such a public place, there's so many people. Remember once I was with at a wedding, and a big wedding, one of the Tervadas families, and I was there, and I found about $40. It wasn't a lot of money. It was $40. And can I keep it? At the time, the Rosh Yeshiva Rav Belsky was alive and well. I went to my Rosh Yeshiva and I asked Rosh Yeshiva Rav Belsky, I said to him, can I keep the money? He said, of course you keep the money. People already, anyone who lost it was miyayish. The halacha, you allowed to keep it? They gave up on it. So the woman says, no, it's my money. So they went to Beit Din. And the man says to the Dayanim, he says to them, I know halacha. I learned that if you lose it in a public place, the person was miyayish. And the Dayan, who was the Rav of the city, he said very quickly, he said, no, the money still belongs to her. The guy says, what do you mean it belongs to her? She lost it in a public place. She gave up. And he says to the woman, whose money was that? She says, my husband's. He sent me. I'm his shliach to go do the business. So the Rav says, you see, The money is not the woman's. It belongs to her husband. All she is a shliach. And a shliach, an agent, has no right to give up. Oh. The Chazon Ish said to Rav Galinsky, we are all shlichim, we're all agents in this world. Because Baruch Hu's in charge. You have no right to give up. A person has to keep davening to Hashem. Later on in the Parshat, it says, Vayomer Avi, Vayomer Hineni Beni. Right? Yitzchak tells Avraham, my father, right, during the Akedah, and Hashem answers back, and Avraham answers back, Hineni Beni, here I am. But I heard Pshat this year from the Melitzer Rebbe. He writes as follows. He says, Vayomer Avi, if a person says, Father, Tatin Himo, Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Avinu Shebashamayim, what does Hashem say? Vayomer Hineni Beni, here I am, I'm ready to answer. All what you have to do is say, Father, Papa. There was I don't know how long ago this story happened, but they say there was a young couple, members of the Satmar community, and for years, for over 20 years, they tried to have a child with no success, no children. And so they were advised to adopt. So they went through the legal channels, and a social worker, and Goya, she came to their house to interview them, to see if they would be fit parents, legal fit parents. So she gives them a piece of paper, and she says, write down on this paper what you love the most in this world. So, being good Jews, what would you write? What do you love the most in this world? The Eibishter. You write Hashem, right? Hashem is the most that you love. She said, you wrote your answer? He said, yes. She says, okay, now, if you have a child, would you love it more than what you wrote down on the paper? Now, she didn't see what they wrote. She didn't realize that these people, love to them means something great. She thought, like most people write, I love salmon, I love fish, I love my TV show, Chas v'Shalom, whatever it is. And right away, the young couple says, the couple says, absolutely not. To love Hashem, you can't love anything more than Hashem. But they said no. And she said, listen, if you say no, you're going to lose your chance to adopt. Do you change your answer? The couple looks at themselves and say, no, we love Hashem the most. And the reply came that they were not fit to be parents. And they were not allowed to adopt. Exactly 1 year later, after that story happened, the young couple was blessed with twins, a boy and a girl. They showed their love for Hashem, and Hashem answered them back. They said, Vayomer Avi. A lot of times people run after all sorts of sigulot. Do this, do that, like this, like this. There's only one thing to do. Vayomer Avi, my father. Avinu Shebashamayim. And what about a person who, Baruch Hashem, has everything, or has what he needs in life? How does he react? There's a story that goes here in the Paninim al Torah. Chaim brings down a story. There was a mohel. A mohel gets a phone call that they want to invite him to do a brit. The mohel says, Mazel tov, Mazel tov. And he hears the father is so excited. So he says, you sound so excited. How long did you wait to have this baby? He says, we waited 22 years for this baby. And he says, you want me to be the mohel? He says, yeah. He says, wow. For the next 5 days, this mohel was so excited. He prepared himself. I'm about to do a milah on a miracle baby. 22 years. He gets to the hall. He gets to the place for making the milah. And it looks very Parshat, very simple. Nothing out of the ordinary great. Comes, he starts to do the brit milah, the whole ceremony. and making the berachot. He expects the whole crowd. First of all, it's not such a big crowd. He expected a bigger crowd, a big miracle after 22 years. How many people would be there, right? Small crowd. They say the berachot. The amen is regular. He thought people would scream it. He's not sure what's going on. The guy said 22 years, he waited. So, and after the whole Brit was over, and he's talking to the father of the Avi Haben, the father of the child, and all of a sudden, like about a 20-year-old boy walks over to this man who's the father of this baby, and says, Tati, I'm going to take the other 5 little kids home, and Rivki is going to take care of the other 4 children who are still here. So now this Moyle is like, one second. He says, how many kids you have? You have over 10 kids? He says, yes, Kanai Nahara. He says to him, but you told me that you waited for 22 years for this baby. He says, I never meant to lie to you. But it's true. For this baby, I waited 22 years. I didn't say I didn't have different babies. You see, Rabotai? If a person realizes every little gift that he has from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this baby is the greatest baby. I've been waiting 22 years for this one. It's not, I have another, Isho Adin. No, that's not the way it is. It's not a number. It's this one. In order to realize the good you have in life, you have to be Makir Tov. You have to realize you have good. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us so good. We say, Vayomer Avi, Vayomer Hineni B'ni. But we have to say Avi. We have to be Makir Tov. We have to say thank you. We have to realize the good we have in life. So Rabotai, I know this year is longer than usual, but it's a very long Parshat. We didn't even go anywhere. We were still stuck in the beginning. We didn't even do so much more. But this will have to make it for tonight. So Be'ezat Hashem, just to review really quickly the 3 lessons that we learned. It's much more than 3 lessons, but the 3 main lessons that we learned from this week's Parshat. Number 1, we learned you have to be a Vayeira person. You have to see and understand what you're seeing. You have to look and really look. Hear and truly hear. Then we learned that doing mitzvot between person and another person is so great that to rub another person's foot, to give him a massage and warm him up, is a kibbut, is an honor. And then we learned the final lesson. Hayipaleh Hashem davar, there is nothing that Hashem can't do. A person just has to say, Vayomer Avi, Father, and realize all the good he has and what Hashem continues to bless us with. Bez Hashem, like we said, all this Torah should be the Nishmat. My father-in-law, Simcha Chaim, Ben Elisheva, we should go Chayil L'Gan Eden. Bez Hashem, we should take these lessons, apply it to life. It's not easy, but it's important. And if we do it, slowly but surely, we become much greater people ourselves. And with this, I would love to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Toda Rabah.